Hello, all of you pot smokers and weed freaks and those that are kinda curious. Welcome to another episode of When I'm High. We've got a new interview for you today. Chances are this is going to be another two-parter, so next week will be part 2. And for the sake of just anonymity, that's a word I just made up, our subject today is named Sam. Hello, Sam. How you doing?
Good to see you, Spence.
Good to see you.
And I do mean see you. We're in one place together, aren't we?
Yes. This is the first time I've had a face-to-face, although it, be 8 feet plus apart from each other. But yeah, this is much different than the other interviews that I've done. I like it a lot better. So we're here to talk about your experience with cannabis, and let's get into that. Because I know it's a little bit different than some of my other subjects. So can you tell me the first time you tried pot and the first time it got you high, and then we'll get into a little bit more details after that.
I was quite old. I was probably 40-ish. Actually, first time didn't have an effect on me. Second time did, and at that point I was 50-ish. And then there have been several times since then, since pandemic, because legalization in my area seemed to roughly coincide with the end of the world as we know it. And my wife and I decided, if not now, when? And she'd never tried it. And I had just those 2 experiences. One of them, I guess you'd say, unsuccessful. The other one had an impact on me. So...
And those first times were many years ago-ish?
Mm-hmm. Right, because I'm pushing 60 now. So we're talking about 20 years ago and about 10 years ago.
Got it. And so getting back into it, earlier in this crazy times this year, what was that first time back like for you?
Yeah, the first time was mild. I think that we had taken a pretty darn small dose. We were going with the gummies approach. Mm-hmm. We're not big fans of smoking anything. Those 2 previous experiences for me had been with a bong. But we liked the idea of gummies. And yeah, first time was mild, I'd say. Relaxation and... honestly, I don't remember. And that shows that there was some impact, right?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to say anything about your age, but that could factor into it too.
That's a factor too, isn't it?
And do you remember how many milligrams you took that first time?
Well, so I'm looking at this tin, and it looks like they're 5 apiece. And, we may have taken 1 each. Mm-hmm. I may have taken 1.5. I don't know. I don't remember. All I know is that once it was up to 2, then there was something more concrete.
2 pieces, yeah. So 10 milligrams.
Yeah.
And you're a taller guy,
yeah.
So there's going to be obviously a different effect for you.
That's right.
And I think for some people, when it's not really in your system, I think it takes a little bit of time to sort of start to build up. So maybe that first time after a decade, it doesn't really know how to affect your body quite yet. I don't really know the science on that, so apologies to all you people who do know. Maybe I'm speaking out of my ass. But I think that that's partly why, if you did have maybe 7.5 milligrams, which tends to be higher than a normal first dose, maybe that's why it didn't really do so much.
Right. And for our listeners, he is not, in fact, speaking out of his ass. I'm watching his mouth move. So unless he's like the most unique ventriloquist in history, and I'm remembering now that actually that time before, the second time was not 10 years ago, it was 5 years ago. I remember when it was. So it was 15 years ago and 5 years ago. Both times I was on tour with a rock band. So, when in Rome, right?
Yeah, exactly. And let's see. So you've already mentioned that you prefer not to smoke.
Right.
Have you only had gummies or edibles, or have you had other ones as well, since starting up again?
Gummies and s'mores. That's it.
S'mores?
Yeah. Rich chocolate with creamy marshmallow and maple graham crackers. We put them in actual s'mores.
So these are pre-packaged. He's got the bag right there. He's looking at it.
Well, I want to be ready. Let me take it out and look at it and show it to you.
I think I do remember seeing at some dispensary they had some sort of. Okay, so
They're just the right size for trick or treat. No, we're not going to do that. But you know what? Boy, as I look at the packet, if someone were to hand this to, say, a kid, I don't see anything on here about the contents.
That's a problem. Yeah,
that is a problem.
So these are individually wrapped inside of a larger bag, and yeah, you want to be very careful.
Yeah, they're rectangles, look like, or squares, maybe about an inch square, and it says toasted s'mores on one side and rich chocolate with creamy marshmallow and maple graham crackers on the other. There is a logo here, very small print, with the name of the company.
Okay.
But I don't see anything about the active ingredient.
Interesting.
That's bad. That's Joe Camel stuff, frankly.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
I'm guessing the outside package does say something, yeah.
Yeah, but if you're trick-or-treating and someone just, don't do that.
No.
Don't do that.
And then, so you said you would just add those to regular s'mores and get a little kick.
Yeah, and I think once after that, we just, we were grilling out with a friend, and so we just decided to do it that way. But I think we've had them since then, just straight up.
Okay. Do they taste good?
Yeah, taste like s'mores.
Nice. Don't you love that?
Oh, yeah.
So how often do you imbibe? I don't want to say smoke,
Right. It's not smoking, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so like I said, wife and I, we were sort of coming to the same conclusion right about the time of the pandemic and cutting ourselves some slack, dyeing our hair strange colors, and distracting ourselves. So, since March, probably maybe 8 times. So not a lot. It's still kind of a special occasion thing. If it had just bowled us over and we loved it, I'm sure it would be more often. But that wasn't really our feeling. We didn't hate it. We didn't love it. We found it more interesting than fun, though there were some fun elements. I shouldn't use the past tense. I should say are, because it's not like we've sworn off this stuff.
Yeah. So it wasn't this crazy mind-blowing thing, but it was good enough to keep on trying it once or twice a month, it sounds like.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And then in a very general sense, what does it feel like? Because we're going to get into some details in a bit too.
Yeah, general sense. Well, I tend to go to the details. General sense. Okay, there was an impact on short-term memory, which I know is typical. There was an increase in silliness and amusability, let's say. There was kind of a, how would I put this? Just a little bit of a Twilight Zone element to being in a room that was normally quite familiar, walking the dog on a stretch of sidewalk that was normally quite familiar. Things seemed a little bit different.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to get into that stuff. So what makes you decide to have some at a certain time? Is it sometimes you alone? Is it you together? What makes you decide to have some?
I don't think either one of us has done it alone. And I think the first time or two it was probably, like buddy system in reverse. Because buddy system would typically mean, or designated driver would typically mean, that one of you stays sober. Buddy system, I guess, is different. We're both going to go out there, swim out to the island.
Hold hands, do it.
Take the plunge. So they're different. Yeah, they're actually the opposite now that I think of it. But, I mean, for us, it was and is, I think, something that's just kind of fun to try together and compare notes afterward.
Yeah, I think it's a fun thing to do with a partner of some kind, or sometimes in a group of people, which obviously is not going to happen for a while.
Yeah, plus she said some really funny things that I was glad I was there to hear, and probably vice versa.
Yeah, sure. And so is there something then that happens that makes you decide to do that together?
So we have wine each night, a glass or two with dinner. And, I'm a lot bigger than she is. I don't get as much of a buzz or a relaxation from it per ounce as she does. And what has prompted it? So the one time we had a friend over, and she was a pot virgin, like my wife was back in March the first time. I was pretty darn close to a virgin, too. I mean, let's just say, if you want to use that analogy, I had dipped in a couple of times.
Just a couple.
But not inhaled.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So
Literally, actually, in this case.
That's right. Still haven't inhaled. You'd think I was smoking because I forgot the question.
Get distracted.
What else has prompted it? Just a sense of, let's watch this silly movie and maybe it will be enhanced.
Right. It's been a few weeks maybe since the last time, and let's see if this new experience.
Yeah,
or something.
exactly right. She tends to get sleepy at night fairly easily, and if she's had a drink or two, and especially if then pot is involved, sometimes it kind of knocks her out.
Sure.
Which defeats the purpose, and the stuff ain't cheap. So
no, you don't want to waste it.
Right.
I definitely don't. Do you do it with wine as well, or
we have?
Yeah. Has it sometimes by itself?
Maybe once by itself when we did it in the afternoon, so that she would stay awake.
Yeah, I think that's a good experiment.
Yeah. But generally, have a little wine with dinner, and I've been saying it takes a while to take effect, so let's have it right when we start dinner, so that when dinner's over, we're starting to feel something.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that there is something to be said about having a little bit of food in your stomach anyway.
Oh, okay.
I think it helps to get the digestion going.
Well, sadly, getting food into my stomach has never been a struggle.
Me neither.
I've gotten older.
All right, so some of the specifics. How we've touched on a few of these already. Mm-hmm. How does your level of focus change?
Focus. That's interesting. It's not that while watching a television show, our attention wanders, or we get bored, or we get up and leave. I would say that there is extreme focus. Mm-hmm. And connected to that, the shows last forever.
And feel free to give any specific examples as well.
An episode of Star Trek Voyager that turned into a miniseries.
One episode.
Yeah.
Each scene was like an episode.
Happened a couple times, and I went back both times and rewatched the next day. It's like, I remember this part, I remember this part, I remember this part. But right now, it's just chugging along.
Sure.
Like a normal 50-minute narrative. Mm-hmm. And there were some other things I think. Oh, I know. There was a Lifetime movie, one of those Lifetime thrillers that just went on and on and on. And those really, you don't want those to go on and on.
I was going to say, for some people, those probably drag on anyway.
Exactly right. Though I have a friend, she works as an editor for things like, cheerleader, nanny from hell, whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's good steady work if you can get it.
Very consistent, yeah.
Out there in Hollywood. But the thing that leaps to mind is commercials, and specifically one commercial. That we were watching side by side. And we lie on the floor with our dog Paul. And we're watching, something, I can't really remember what it was. And a commercial comes on. And as we recall it, they were animated crackers with little legs and arms jumping around and talking and possibly singing. They may or may not have had cheese on or in them. I don't recall. Mm-hmm. But my wife pointed to the screen and said, "I think that's real." And I said, "Honey, it's on the TV. It's not." And she said, No, I think that's real. And later, she claimed that what she meant was, "I think that's really on our TV, not something we're imagining." I honestly don't know whether that was embarrassed revisionism,
right?
A little white lie, or what. But I've quoted it to her a number of times in different
As you
contexts.
Should.
Yes. When something amazing happens, or something obviously fake, and I'll say, "No, but I think that's real."
that can be interpreted so many different ways. But her reasoning for that and what you experienced, I think, are either perfectly fine, but I prefer your way.
I'm pretty sure it was real in the sense of being on TV, because otherwise it was a mass hallucination.
Right.
Or at least a two-person one.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's real. Really on our TV.
Yeah.
Yes, it is really on our TV.
Yeah.
And these are real crackers that are alive. I like that. So focus. You get super focused on just whatever is happening in front of you.
Yeah, and I'm a working artist. What I haven't found myself doing is getting focused on any of the several projects I don't generally have going on at one time. It's really more on a distraction, like a movie or a TV show.
Okay.
And it's not really on conversation either, because, for instance, the one time I think that we've done it with a third party, and she was visiting for the weekend, and she was curious, and she knew we'd been doing it. And, we were paying attention to each other in this conversation, but getting sidetracked a lot, too. So maybe the focus was on each other, but wasn't on the main line of the conversation. There really ceased to be one.
Right. There are a lot of tangents and
Yeah.
things. Yeah, I think that seems pretty common. And in that case, it's one thing to do it by yourself and to just have the thoughts go on in your mind and you're experience something. And then when you add a second person, just in relationships in general, that changes the complexity of the situation because you're both two different personalities.
Yes.
It's reacting in your body differently. And then you add a third person.
It's
and
exponential at that point.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. So who knows, how
That makes sense.
the energy of that situation goes.
Yeah. The reason I mentioned that I don't get focused on my art, now granted, I've never tried.
I was going to get there next. Yeah.
I have never tried. And I think maybe the reason I've never tried is that as a working artist and someone who has been doing art since I was a kid and went to school with, I had a lot of friends who were potheads. And most of them were artists or aspiring artists, and most of them were aspiring, because my experience of them was that there was a lot of sitting on the floor, sometimes in a circle, backs leaned up against the wall, talking about things. Oh, this would be amazing. Stuff that sounded brilliant at the time that they either didn't remember or that they remembered and it wasn't, it wasn't worth remembering. And I always cite Tom Petty as the exception to the rule. He was the most prolific working pothead artist I've ever heard of, because he'd do an album every 2 years. He toured constantly. He was doing what he loved. So maybe if they were college students, maybe if they, had reached that level of getting paid to do what they love, maybe they could have been working pothead artists. But maybe all the pot use was detrimental to them finding that success.
Yeah,
I'm just throwing these out as possibilities that have occurred to me.
Sure, and you never really know what the answer is. It sounds like there was maybe a lot of talking and a lot less of doing, and so you actually went and did the work.
Right.
So speaking of that, you may not have really experience with this, but the creativity, do you feel, even though you haven't done any of your work in the while high, do you notice any changes in your creativity
During that time? During this past time?
Yeah, and that's just in your day-to-day life, really.
Not really. I would cite the pandemic, actually. I mean, I've always been, as you know, because we've collaborated on some things, a fairly prolific working artist, and usually multiple projects at once. If anything, I think the pandemic has bumped that up a little bit, because it's something over which I have some control, as opposed to the things where control has been taken from us or diminished. Some of the collaborative things that I do, especially the in-person collaborations, have gotten a little trickier. But I've co-written songs, with people, and more recently done some performances with social distancing outdoors in safe spaces. So what was I getting at? I wouldn't say that the very occasional use that we've had in the past half year has impacted my overall creativity level.
Do you have any interest in trying, kind of as an experiment, to try to do any of these things while high?
I wouldn't want to take the stage high because
No.
just seems too risky for the audience.
More of like at home writing something, whatever.
It would be writing, or, I do a little drawing. Maybe I'd do that.
Sure.
I do some filmmaking. Maybe I'd do that. Not out on location, but little animating. Maybe. You've seen my flip book animations. Maybe I should do one of those while high. It could turn out really interesting, I suppose.
I think interesting, definitely. I've talked to some people who are specifically writers on this podcast, and it seems like, if I'm remembering correctly, the their editor brain is different. So if you write something sober, come back to it when high.
Right.
It's the way you look at what you have already done. You're gonna see it in a different way.
Or vice versa.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. But, you're touching on something that I talk about a lot, both in teaching, writing, and other arts, and in just talking with colleagues or thinking about my own process, which is left brain, right brain. And my guess would be that people tend to be left brain dominant when they're sober and tend to be more accessing of the right unconscious brain when they are on something. That's my guess.
Right.
And I always say a 50-50 partnership between the two is ideal, and that most of the writing I see from students in workshop is much more left brain. And it's planned out and it's outlined and it reads that way. And I try to get them to access that unconscious, that dream half. But on the other hand, you'll get this happens every year or two. Someone says, he hands a piece out and says, so I had this wild dream earlier this week, and it was so interesting, I wrote it down. And those don't work either, because that's all right brain, And so it's unstructured, and there's maybe some things in there that are interesting. So when I think back to like I think that's real story about the TV commercial, see, I would use that while sober, writing a piece about being high, and I would I'm going to tell you the story about walking my dog.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to use that too. But those are things that the raw material came about while high. But then the editor would come back later and say, this, and this, I can use. The rest of it, I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's, it seems like for a lot of people, that's another thing, is where you start to get these ideas or these experiences or these different ways of looking at things when you're in that state of mind. And then later, if you've remembered it or if you've written it down, like, oh yeah, I can use that as a jumping off point for something else.
Right. Well, Keith Richards famously, when he was not just drunk, but God knows what else, this is back in the 60s, stumbled into his hotel room with a riff in his head, turned on tape recorder and played dun dun da 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 da, and fell over, knocked himself out. But the tape kept taping for the rest of the 45 minutes, but he rewound it, and there was satisfaction.
Yeah. And this guy that I'm talking to right now was actually interviewed years ago for the previous portion of this podcast, and I think that story actually made it into the music episode.
Okay.
So some of you may hear that twice, or I may cut it out. I don't know. So I think it would be interesting, if you were to do some of these experiments with your writing or whatever it is, just for my own curiosity,
Okay,
I'd love to know what happens with that.
Well, sure, because you know my work really well, and it would be interesting for both of us.
Yeah,
to see.
And I think it is all about balance, like you were saying.
Right.
So, what is your sense of time like? You've already talked about this one a little bit.
Yeah, it's a biggie. Just seem to stretch out. More so with the TV. And I wonder maybe there may be a neural phenomenon there, or an optoneural phenomenon, because it's not like those conversations seem to last forever. It's the TV shows where I'm passively watching and listening as opposed to participating. So there might be something there.
Is it watching TVs and movies that is what you usually do when you're high? Or are there other, is that the most common activity?
That and talking.
And talking?
In that
Yeah.
order, I guess.
Yeah. And so the conversations don't feel as draggy.
No.
Interesting.
They feel a little bit scattered and funny.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there are those moments of, oh, this is an insight. Yeah. There are those eureka or faux eureka
Right.
moments. And then, too, there is, this sort of segues into talking about memory. I may have one of those eurekas, and by the time she's done talking and it's time for me to respond and I want to fold the eureka in, it's gone.
Yep. Well, and I think that has to do with focus.
Yeah.
I think memory and focus, and I've mentioned this many times before, I think the memory and the focus are very closely related.
Right.
I think that you end up getting so focused on the other thing that's happening, you've completely forgotten about what it was that you were just thinking about. I think that's one of the reasons why the memory loss happens, at least.
No, there was something I was going to say about that, but no, I've forgotten. Just kidding.
Sadly, that actually happens to me in my day-to-day life every single day.
But no, I'm kidding. But the thing is, I, as someone who usually talks more than 50% of the time in conversations, is aware of it, and is not thrilled with it. I've been focused on something called intentional listening. And so what I'm trying to consciously do in conversation is not be thinking of what I'm going to say next, but be focused on what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Even if things are popping up like, oh, I know what I want to say to that, but now she's talking, so I need to wait. No, you need to listen.
Focus.
Right, focus. And I don't think pot is helpful with that.
Well, no. So I was going to ask specifically, it's with conversations as well, but specifically with watching TV shows, what is going through your brain when you're watching? You're watching the show, but are there other, what is the thought process in your head, if you can remember?
Yeah. So, as a filmmaker and a film scholar, I'm used to watching things on multiple levels of craft, form, content. My first time watching something I've never seen before is much more naive, and immediate, and what's going to happen, and, feeling for the characters and such. Anything good, I'll go back to and watch again, because part of the reason it was good the first time is the things I didn't notice. And, second time is for subtext, as they say. So the difference here is, I would say I'm not very geared into craft style components of the medium. I think there are some associations going on, but more personal. It seems to be a less intellectual viewing and more of a amusement park ride.
So you're more just in it for the ride.
I think so.
Okay. When you say personal, are you thinking about your relation or how your life relates to what you're watching? It's hard to put into words.
It is, and it's a little alarming because you're close to the edge of solipsism and a world of the self. I think it is a more internal phenomenon because I'm not thinking about craft. I might watch that Voyager and the scene with 7 of 9 and think, okay, so this sort of anticipates certain AI-themed pieces since then, like Ex Machina, in certain ways. And I'm not going to think that when I'm high.
Okay.
I'm going to maybe think, yeah, wow, she's great. She's hot. She's so tall. I wonder how tall Jerry Ryan really is. Oh, well, but she is wearing those tall shoes. When is the first time I saw her as this character? It'll be more like that.
Sure. Yeah. And this is just why I love doing this, because I love seeing how people's inner thoughts are changed or whatever, especially coming from somebody like you who is such a film scholar and who does see film in such a different way than most people. it's interesting to.
Dumbs me down, Spencer.
Oh, good. You're back at our level now.
It's not. Well, I didn't say you. You have a.
I did.
You're in media too. I think it desophisticates.
Interesting. Okay.
My viewing of media.
Are there any TV shows or movies that you've watched while high for the very first time?
Well, certainly that Lifetime movie.
Right. Right.
We don't sit around watching,
anything a little bit more highbrow than that.
Oh, jeez. I honestly, other than those two examples, I don't recall what else we've watched.
Okay. Oh, and just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was going to also say, are there things that you've watched that you had watched before while sober that you already, had at least one pass of? And I was just curious if there was anything like that.
I mean, what you're describing is what would require an actual experimental approach of let me try something I've seen and know very well, maybe even I've taught or reviewed or something, and now let me see something for the first time and compare and contrast. And it's really because it hasn't been done in an intentional way,
controlled.
Yeah, it's willy-nilly.
Which is the case with most of the people I talk to. Most people don't take this in that sort of experimental way.
Yeah.
But we could always do a part 2 to this. You could get back to me on the movies and TV shows and your creative work.
I'm an artist, not a scientist.
Right,
Damn it.
right. I don't know. Let's see. So we talked about movies and TV shows a little bit. Music is already a big part in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Have you played music or listened to music while high at all?
No, and I really should. I should pick up one of my instruments and play something I know. I'd say that would be a good thing to try, something I know well. Mm-hmm. But also play something, try to improvise something.
Just let it flow.
Yeah, maybe with the tape on, because who knows, could be satisfaction too.
Right.
It probably would be the original one, and it's like, wow, that's great. Yeah, Keith Richards wrote it. That's why. Mm-hmm. I should definitely fold music in next time just to see what happens.
Yeah, that's a big one for people, especially people who play music, but also listening to music. I mean, I think mm-hmm. that's another big one that people tend to listen to. So we're going to add that to the list of the things that you're going to do. Your homework.
Thank you. I'm guessing the people who played, was it Pink Floyd while watching Wizard of Oz? That idea probably emerged from and during marijuana use, I would guess.
Very, very likely. So I actually did that. There was no substances involved. I was with a couple people who got those together.
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz and I think it was Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it was, this was probably at least 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was surprising how many things actually did line up. Mm-hmm. Shockingly so.
Yeah. Well, one of my very, very, very favorite movies is The Shining. There is a whole documentary called Room 237.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of film scholars on there talking about their really way out theories.
Oh, yeah.
And when I say way out, I don't mean there's nothing to them.
Right.
Because, I subscribe to the theory of intentional fallacy, that the artist's intention is irrelevant and the piece is the piece is the piece. And it means 7.5 billion things to 7.5 billion people on Earth. Mm-hmm. But I would never have said this is Kubrick admitting to and apologizing for having faked the moon landing for NASA. I would never have said this is about the Holocaust. I wish I'd been in that film because I have my own very specific feelings about The Shining as a genre allegory about domestic violence, domestic abuse, child abuse. Yeah.
Well, that would be a really good movie to put on your list of things to watch when you're high.
Yes, you're right. Oh, yeah. It would be because it's Kubrick and because...
that alone in and of itself is a good enough reason. But just the fact that you know it so well.
Yeah. Like 25 times worth, and including opening night when I was 18. So yeah, that would be a mind watching The Shining. It already is kind of a semi-controlled substance just watching that movie.
Oh, yeah. So what about the food, your experience of food when you get high? It sounded like before that you would have the dinner, you typically right at the beginning, so the dinner, you probably no effects yet, but do you have, dessert or snacks or anything like that?
I don't think we've had a munchies phenomenon, probably because, it's starting to take effect right after dinner.
Right.
And we're not up very long after that. I'm up a little longer than she is, and because it does often have a kind of soporific effect for her. And I haven't found myself, even when she's asleep and I'm up for a little while watching Voyager, say, I don't find myself thinking, gee, now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
So that one hasn't hit us. Maybe if we were to start at 11 in the morning or something, maybe it would.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or, an hour before dinner or something, and say, okay, now we're going to experience dinner in this way.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and it's also, there's the munchy side of things, but then there's also just the experience of the food.
Does it taste better?
Right. The taste, the mental, whatever that is going into your brain. The next question, I have said many times, this is a very personal subject, so feel free to pass for whatever reason. But it's sex. Have you had sex while high, and what's that like?
See, when she falls asleep, that makes it really tough.
Sure it does.
So I'm going to vote for 11 a.m. and afternoon delight. So
you took the words right out of my mouth.
We'll see.
Yeah.
See if the skyrockets are in flight or not. I know alcohol doesn't have the most mutually beneficial relationship for the man.
Right.
So, but pot, I have no idea.
Well, I definitely see a second interview in our future. Let's see.
With the homework, yeah.
Yes.
In between.
I've given homework to other people, too. I don't think they've actually done it. I'm have to give them an F. Have you noticed your dreams being different at all, or your sleep being different at all?
I'm just out. Like I am most nights, I'm just out.
Okay, so not really, not much of a change. Do you think that by the time you get to bed, it's sort of out of your system, you're coming down usually?
It's hard to say, because if you fall asleep, who's to say? I will say that during this pandemic quarantine period, I've had mildly to moderate amount more long, complex, often frustrating, unnerving dreams. And I'm sure that must be common right now.
Yeah. The stress level is really high.
I think it's working itself out in my sleep, because I'm actually doing, I think, quite well consciously dealing with this, for us, unprecedented situation.
Yeah.
But when I'm asleep, I think the right brain says, you act like it's okay, but really, this is hellish.
Do you feel like you said that consciously you tend to deal with it pretty well, but after dinner, when you're watching some TV show or something, do you feel like your stress level changes at all? Do you feel that it calms you down at all when you get high?
No, it's not that it calms me more. There's a difference between calm and relax. To me, relax is purely physical, and calm is more mental. That may or may not be true if you, on your other show, look up calmness, say,
right,
and relaxation on your dictionary show. But that's kind of how I feel, that the relax is more of a physical, bodily thing, and that calm has to do more with a sense of inner peace. So I feel pretty calm even throughout this period, most
just
of the
in
time.
general.
Yeah, but physically relaxing in the way that a couple glasses of wine, likewise with pot.
And then in a strictly just mental sense, we talked a little bit about, these sort of faux eureka moments or anything.
Yeah.
Are there any of those moments that have stuck with you, that you've remembered, that, any sort of realizations that could just be realizations in the world? It could be spirituality. It could be whatever. Have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah, there goes one now. Oh, it's gone.
Yep.
Nope. Don't retain any of it.
Yeah.
I haven't been writing it down. Haven't been tape recording.
Right.
Haven't been with someone sober and said, "Hey, remember this," when I don't. Nothing like that. So.
Do you think you'd be willing to actually have paper or phone nearby or something and write something down?
Sure. Again,
if you
we
remember
haven't been approaching it, in that way. But sure.
Yeah. I think that is helpful, because even though 50% or more of those things may not actually mean anything or may not be good, I think it's always good to at least have it down.
Yeah.
Because then you can go back and see if it was good or not.
Right.
And there might be some gems in there.
Yeah, there might be. again, I just think back to college,
Yeah.
And I didn't hear a lot of brilliance.
Right.
Dear friends, I love them to pieces. I didn't hear a lot of brilliance. And what they consider to be brilliant, maybe it's subjective, maybe in some way it was, but they never got up and made it happen.
Mm-hmm. So that's going to be the end of part 1 for Sam's interview. In part 2, we get off track a little bit, I guess. We get into a much bigger conversation about the legality of cannabis and why or why not. And, it's actually a really interesting conversation that we could have talked about for a really long time. So look forward to that coming up next week. So that's going to be the end of this episode. Thank you very much for listening. Become a patron if you so choose. Get episodes early, probably some exclusives later. Rate and review so this podcast can get more exposure. Just share it. Tell the people about it. Subscribe, all that fun stuff. And until next time, this is Spencer and somebody talking about what it's like to be high.